Eric Tucker is the executive director of the Brooklyn Laboratory Charter School. He has a really interesting background. He was the CEO of something called the Design Innovation Factory, which, among other things, designed adaptive learning systems for students. But he's also been a director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And I am going to let him take charge of the screen and talk to you for a few minutes, and then I will join him at the end for a few questions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Today, I'm going to be talking about inclusion and empathy, talking about wellness, particularly in the public school K-12 context, and sharing some of the lessons we've learned since school doors have closed at Brooklyn Lab. Co-founded by Aaron Moat and myself in 2013, Brooklyn Lab exists to eradicate the achievement gap by offering a high-quality public option to students through a cluster of middle schools and high schools in downtown Brooklyn. I'll share a video that was one of the kind of first things we did when school doors closed to begin the process of engaging families, students that we call scholars, and staff members in the preparation for reopening and a safeguarded, healthy return to school.
At Brooklyn Lab, we are strong, resilient, and committed to rebuilding a learning environment that prioritizes the safety, health, and well-being of everyone in our community. We invite you to join us as we begin planning what it would look like to reopen our school doors safely and appropriately. Our hopes and fears, concerns, and ideas must shape our solutions. We've begun to explore what's possible, and we're sharing our best current thinking to get your guidance on 4 important questions. How can we keep learning moving forward? What will classrooms look like and feel like? How can we keep students and teachers safe on their way to and from school? How do we honor scientific and public health guidelines? Please join us in creating solutions that ensure the well-being of our school community, now and always.
So the Equity by Design work started with focus groups, conversations, joint planning sessions where we engaged both families, students, and staff as members of the school community, and engaged design firms, architecture firms, engineering firms in order to hear and understand fears, frustrations, concerns about the return to school as a safeguarded approach. And ultimately, between March and August, engaged in over 150 kind of agile, collaborative, inclusive design sessions geared towards planning our facilities return, engaging our stakeholders and trying to understand from a social emotional wellness perspective, from an honoring scientific and public health guidelines perspective, what could we do to facilitate a safe return? On equitybydesign.org, which is the website where we host our resources, there's a range at this point, kind of 10 plus resources that we've shared to capture our thinking. We made a commitment early on, not just to ensure that a widened circle of school community members were a part of the process, but that ultimately we were transparent and accountable for our best thinking at a particular point in time about how to prevent the spread. So to focus on what matters most, from physical distancing, so reimagining classrooms, to kind of how to build a mask wearing or a face covering embracing culture in a classroom, how to collaborate at a distance, how to make sure that there were opportunities for hand hygiene. How to contain the spread. So reimagine arrival routines and procedures. You can look at the kind of lower left picture there, which is a mock-up of what's now kind of every corner of the building and tens and tens of thousands of square feet outdoor pavilion that's covered, keeps students warm, dry, safe, and allows for kind of safe arrival routines and procedures with symptoms checks, checks for masks, checks for temperature, etc. We redesigned pedestrian flow in the building, established contact tracing ecosystems so that every aspect of our schedule, our responsibilities, our instructional approach built backwards from the idea that students or staff members would test positive at some point during the course of the year. And our role was to be honest and transparent about it, and to make sure that there was kind of an opportunity to, communicate effectively. Containing the spread is, also involves approaches, for instance, designating quarantine and isolation spaces, creating cool down areas where it's appropriate to take off your mask. For instance, if a panic attack is ensuing, or you just need a space to reset, but need to reset safely behind a plexiglass screen and away from peers. How we handle unexpected arrivals of students, or of staff members, or visitors in a world of staggered schedules, and how we address shared amenities like bathrooms. Reimagining classrooms to meet the needs of students who have IEP mandates, who have students with disabilities, or who need particular classroom settings was also a kind of sustained priority of the work. Ultimately, this is a challenging time, and we concluded that every student needs a success coach, needs a primary person, and that meant we needed to build the capacity of teachers, of other adults in the building to build relationships, build connections, set goals, and support young people to reflect on and build the ability to navigate choppy waters. And it's meant identifying scientific partners, for instance, Character Lab, to work on translating research and evidence-based practices into practices within the school community. A part of human-centered design is making sure that we're communicating effectively. And one of the things that's grown from our work over the last 6 months is a set of open and free iconography that translates concepts like a staggered A-B asynchronous schedule for learning, which is how some school systems are communicating, to a visual language that communicates priorities in a way that a parent who doesn't speak English or a student with auditory processing issues could understand what's expected and work with the school community to meet expectations. Meeting the need, one part of inclusion is designing for the margins. And as we kind of work to, as we kind of start questions and answers here, I wanted to share a resource about a project that we launched with our colleagues, the Educating All Learners Alliance, which is one of the ways that we've sought to make sure that the needs of our most complex learners are met during this time.
With school doors shut, an alliance of special education, civil rights, and technology organizations has come together to ask, how can we ensure education continues for all learners, especially students with disabilities? Through the Educating All Learners Alliance, teachers discover and share vetted resources that work. Together, we can build a pathway to possible for every learner.
Wow, thank you, Eric. So you clearly have done some groundbreaking work at the Brooklyn Lab School. And I know that a lot of other schools are taking advantage of it, and you're essentially consulting with them. What is it that enabled you to do all this? I mean, you seem to have resources that other schools lack, and you've really taken, I know you work with 6 design firms. This is really important work, but how did it happen?
So one of the things that we recognized is that design partners, nonprofit partners, others who kind of rolled up their sleeves and have been working with the school had the same fears and concerns that our teachers and our parents and our students had. So all of us in New York were sorting through, particularly parents of school-age children, were sorting through, in April and in May, thinking about what an eventual return to school in the fall might look like. And it was that kind of parental concern and the concern for loved ones, immune compromised or medically fragile members of households. That's really been a North Star. So a lot of our leadership team are parents of school-age children, and we linked arms with other individuals and teams that were concerned about the need to have a return to school be a safeguarded return, to not be a kind of political conclusion of what was necessary, but to be reflective of a science and research-based process. And so honestly, a lot of the work that's happened has been kind of voluntary, and people donating their own research and development dollars and time to build solutions that work for our school community, but hopefully have wider relevance and applicability.
Well, and you're not a lifelong educator. You're more of a designer, an activist, a data-based person, and it clearly has informed the way you're running this school system, which is quite impressive. Has this set of resources really been utilized by a lot of other schools?
Yeah, so we have thousands of other schools who are using different tools from the Equity by Design Toolkit, and have reached millions of viewers in one way or another. One of the central tensions with innovation and education is that people feel like great solutions are developed that have evidence that they work, but evidence-based solutions then aren't adopted as widely as they otherwise might be. We believe, one, in doing open source free work, sharing tools that are open source and free, but frankly, we also believe that by having students, teachers, families at the table during the design process, that it's much more likely that the challenges and that the problems will be defined in a way that when solutions eventually emerge, there'll be solutions that have wide relevance and applicability. So we really encourage, technologists and solution providers to spend time early on, not with a hammer in search of a nail, but ultimately with empathy and a desire to listen to and deeply understand what the lived experience of students, families, and teachers is.
Great. Yeah, I love that you started by mentioning empathy. Thank you for that. Oh, here's my last question for you. You started the school. It's very inclusive. You've made this major pivot during COVID, but what's the number one lesson you've learned running this school?
So we founded Brooklyn Lab in the Obama era, at a moment where it seemed clear that the arc of history in America was bending towards racial justice, economic justice, a world that was more inclusive and worked better for all. Frankly, working with hundreds of middle schoolers and high schoolers who are targeted and sometimes maligned by the powers that be in our society in this, during this administration, has really highlighted for me personally that our future has to be a shared one, that the young people who we're educating in public schools today are going to be inheriting the businesses, the city halls, the services within the military, the folks who are going to be walking in corridors of power in 2 and 3 decades are the young people who we're educating in schools today. And the signals we send and the language we use around who gets to be at the table when we're building products, when we're designing solutions, when we're taking responsibility for problems, and when we're working to build a more equitable future, the signals we send in those processes will deeply inform the kind of future we have together as a country. Being an educator, over these last 2.5 decades has been great, because when you kind of look into the eyes, of our children, you see the future. And I'm inspired by and hopeful for the direction this country's heading.
I'm really glad you answered that way. Thank you for doing that. And it dovetails with a number of other things that have been said here. I think we are at an inflection point, And thank you for the work you're doing to try to get us out of this inflection point in the right place that we need to go. And I think I still love to be optimistic, so I'm going to stay that way today. Thank you, Eric, for joining us and helping us do that.
Thank you so much.